easy. I'm easy like Sunday morning.
Welcome on in for what arguably could be, and I don't know if there's any much argument about it, the biggest morning after podcast we've ever had. Utah wins. BYU shocks the college football world. Utah State gets a nightcap win as well. Gentlemen, that was we've got nothing to talk about. Where do you want to begin? Do we need to start with BYU?
How about we begin with this? Have we ever seen a weekend in the state of Utah where the number 17 and number 14 teams were beat by BYU and Utah? Have we ever seen two top 20 ranked teams beat in the same weekend? Probably.
I don't know about that. Not. You know, I'll put something in there. Not while playing in the same state. How about that?
It's got to be rare. Like, this has to be one in a million. But it was just a fun night of college football all around. You know, you throw in the Weber State win, and just all across the state of Utah, it was great football. It was entertaining, a lot of different storylines, and so it's really fun to be on air and be able to do this after a weekend like that.
Well, I think we all need to start with a game that surprised all of us, and that was not just BYU beating Boise State, but for a moment there, really putting it to Boise State. I'm calling the Utah State game, and we keep getting score updates. Well, BYU's up 14-10. BYU's up 21-10. BYU's up 28-10. And Kevin White and I kept looking at ourselves like, what is going on down there? So Hans, I'll ask you the question. What was going on down there?
Well, all sorts of guys showed up to play in this game. And if you were listening during the week of the Hanson Scotty show, you heard different mentions. In fact, you've heard it probably the last 2 weeks, but really things surfaced more this week where Kalani put his fingers deep into this defense and said enough's enough. And Kalani will never throw anybody under the bus. I don't even know if he'll fess up or own up to this, or, you know, if we just have to continue to say it on air. But that had Kalani Sitake's signature all over it. You watched the way he used Dan Guanaloco. You watched the way he used Chaz Ayu. You watched the four-man front in, I would say, in every run down and distance and run formation. You watched a change at the linebacker position. You saw personnel changes at the corner. You saw it was a shift of defensive scheme and defensive personnel, and I think that a lot of that caught Boise State off guard. On the offensive side, you saw guys rise to the occasion. Third-string quarterback Baylor Romney showed up and felt like he had an axe to grind with the very first drive that went, whatever it was, 70-some-odd yards, and tied it up 7-7 with Boise State to the start, the very first start of a true freshman here from the state of Utah. The Freeland kid ended up starting at right tackle, number 71, and he did everything he could to maintain. And Scotty, you know, he matched up with that Weaver, that one of the nationally ranked defensive ends or rush edges, whether they count him as a linebacker or end, I don't really care, but he did a fantastic job. Well, he did as good as you could expect a true freshman to do in that situation. A guard that they had started playing at left guard, Clark Barrington, he had a fantastic game on the inside. And these are all names that I don't know how familiar people are. Lapini Katoa showed up to ball. Sione Finau ended up leading the night in rushing, 11 carries for 89 yards. How many times have we called Sione Finau's name? And he ended up leading the team in rushing. It was just guys came out of the woodwork. They showed up, kicked off, and ready to play. And this was the result.
It definitely looked like they played for their coach, which was something we talked about all week, that, hey, if they come back, I mean, I don't think we necessarily thought there was going to be the third string quarterback. I think we were I was feeling until, just a little bit, maybe a couple hours before the game started getting where it was looking like Baylor Romney was probably going to get the start. But doing that with a third string quarterback, I mean, by the way, I was a big fan of Sione Finau. Like he's not big. Like you look at him, you're like, whoa, that guy looks like a wide receiver. I mean, he's probably about maybe 180 pounds, maybe 190, but he's pretty quick and he's shifty. And I mean, it was good seeing BYU rally, because there's like you looked at who was playing in that game. There's no way BYU should have won that game. They shouldn't have. That was straight heart. That was coaching. That was, as you said, Kalani's, putting his fingers on the defense. I mean, that was fun to watch.
Well, and I think it's just something that BYU needed. I mean, and not even, let's just take out the whole Kalani Sitake and the contract thing and everything along that line. That team had kind of a weird, kind of a black cloud ahead of it. And it just needed something to go its way. And boy, did it go its way. And the thing is, Boise State started throwing haymakers there in the fourth quarter. And BYU needed to find a way to keep the offense off the field, run the clock. And they were able to get it done. And that was because I thought, Boise State starts getting some momentum in the fourth quarter hands. I'm thinking the Broncos, because they always find a way to get some dumb luck every now and then. I kind of felt like, oh boy, Boise State's going to find a way to come back and win this thing, and BYU was able to hold them off.
Well, it was bizarre how it was all unraveling too, Scotty. And Boise State's picking up momentum, and you're like, oh my gosh! And then they push BYU to a 4th and 1, and there's this controversy of, did they have a timeout to call a review? Well, how did they even overturn that with the camera angle? Because it showed.
By the way, there was not a camera angle for that. No freaking way. I saw all the angles. There was no angle to show you they were short. You couldn't even see the ball.
It was really tough. I don't know how they overturned it, but BYU was given the first down on ball placement. Boise State, they called for a review, and I know there was speculation that they didn't have timeout, but from what I understand, one of the timeouts was returned as a media timeout or something along those lines. I'll have to dig more into that. So Boise State gets the review and then gets the overturn on, like Lloyd said, a camera angle that I don't know how it showed it. And at that point, you're thinking, oh, man, does Kalani have to punt it?
Yep.
Does he have to punt this? Can he really go for this? And he rolls out Austin Kofensis. Well, I think that Aaron Roderick rolled out Austin Kofensis. This offense had a lot of Roderick's identity on it. And so Austin Kofensis comes out, gets under center, and I'm sure that everybody's thinking, you're going to put a 4th string quarterback in to take the snap on a 4th and 1, but Kofensis has that allure for that end around where he hands it down with the fullback blocking scheme. He turns into the hole and blocks, and they do that power. But instead, he just took the snap, and everybody piled in on his back and pushed him for the yard. And that first down gave BYU the ability to run the clock out, as Boise State had used all their timeouts. And but Scotty, it was just one of those games where you thought, oh, here comes Boise State. It's going to happen again.
They were, look, you're on your own 34-yard line when you go for that first down. I mean, that's gutsy. And if he doesn't get that first down, there's going to be that's one of those where you get it, you're brilliant, you're gutsy, you don't, and everybody's calling for you. I mean, that's going to be one where the barbarians at the gate ready to, with the pitchforks and the torches, if you don't get that first down, but I love it. Like, I really do. And I'd like to think I'd say the same thing even if they didn't get it. Like, that was a team that said, you know what, let's just keep all the fate in our hands. Let's just control our own destiny. If we get the first, we should be able to get a first down. This offensive line's getting a push. Let's get the first down. And they did it. And I really, really admire Kalani for rolling the dice on that one.
so many big performances from guys, Scotty. You know, Matt Bushman was spectacular last night.
Matt made some money last night.
He did, and he had so many clutch moments in that game, and there were some clutch calls for him, you know, to get him the ball in some play action looks. And so I was really pleased with how Matt Bushman played. He got into the blocking scheme a lot, and I'll show in film review that he did some things in blocking that produced. But I feel like Lloyd said, I feel like this team showed up for Kalani. I feel like they love Kalani, and I do know for a fact that it was a different week of preparation, but to a certain extent, so was the week of preparation for South Florida. It's just this one clicked. I don't know if it was being at LeBron Edwards Stadium. I don't know if it was added pressure of losing to South Florida, but man, you know, you look at what Toledo and South Florida have done since beating BYU. South Florida just lost to Navy yesterday, 35-3 or something ridiculous like that. Toledo, at one point, I looked up, and Toledo was down to Ball State 35-0 yesterday. So, you know, these are really ugly losses, and it's hard to explain that Kalani is able to get this team together and come out and get this win against a 14-ranked Boise State team.
Well, I mean, that's just the frustration of the whole season right there. You beat a ranked USC team. You go to SEC country and beat Tennessee. You beat 14th ranked Boise State. And then you have losses to Toledo and South Florida.
Well, look at this, Scotty. So since beating BYU, Toledo lost to Bowling Green 20-7 and lost last night to Ball State 52-14.
Oh, jeez.
52-14, and Toledo falls to second to the bottom in their division in the MAC. So it's really difficult to explain, because BYU fans want answers. Yeah. They want to know, well, how do you lose to South Florida? How do you lose to Toledo? It's unacceptable. They want answers. And all I can say is desperate times require desperate measures. And if you listen to Will Snowden in the preview show, or you listen to me, where we've been talking to these guys, we told you that there were some extreme changes and extreme things going on in Provo. Some of them good, some of them not good. But whatever happened, it stirred up the nest. Guys showed up. It was a nice scheme. It fit well. It was aggressive. It caught Boise State flat-footed. And then there is a certain amount of Boise State looking like they were disinterested in this game. You know, at no point did it, well, except for 5-6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, it just felt like Boise State thought they were going to show up and they were going to be handed the win. So a lot of things went into the way this worked out.
That's a good win to go into a bye.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's a really good win to go into a bye with, and and have time now to really start focusing on Utah State. I mean, they needed that win so bad, and it was good to see.
I forgot to mention that Tyler Algier is the one that led the team in tackles. Kavika Fanua got his too, but Tyler Algier, in a positional change, moving from running back to linebacker as a freshman, ends up on the night with 9 total tackles. And Diane Guanaloco, your second leading tackler, was 6. But I really just, this morning, I wanted to point out some of the guys that came out of the woodwork that played their hearts out, and you could see it. They played their hearts out, and it resulted in a big win, man. Scotty, how far does this win go? It's really crazy, because you look at this and you're like, well, how far does it go to help soothe some of the issues that BYU fans have with Kalani, or mend some of the issues that Tom Holmoe's got with Kalani?
Well, look, let's go back to because I think Kyle Whittingham said it best, and I think we referenced these comments a bunch, but you go back to, and I don't remember I think it was the second 5-7 season when Utah beat Stanford, and Stanford, I think, was ranked 5th in the country. And somebody asked Kyle Whittingham in the post-game press conference about it, and he said, and asked, what does this mean for your program right now? And he said, well, it means nothing if we don't follow it up with other wins. And Utah didn't. And, they went back to losing some heartbreaking games and ended up the season 5-7. So in the grand scheme of things, that win over, I believe, a 5th-ranked Stanford meant nothing because they didn't do anything with it. For BYU, if they don't follow this up with good performances against Utah State and the rest of the way, like if they go to Logan and lay an egg, this game doesn't mean anything. Honestly, if anything, it's more of an indictment on how Kalani's not able to get his team to play consistent football. But if he goes and they beat Utah State and they finish the season strong and they get to a bowl game and they win a bowl game and, you get to your 7-8 wins, then all of a sudden you can look at it and say, okay, you know what? They turned the corner. They've got this thing going where they need to be. They're playing consistent football. So I'll just respond to that the same way Kyle Whittingham did. It means nothing if they don't follow it up and continue to play better. I anticipate they will. I think that they'll play well the rest of the year. I don't know what that means in terms of wins and losses, but I think hopefully now they've found a formula that will translate to better performances going forward. Should we talk Utah?
Let's move on.
Lloyd, how do you feel about Utah this morning?
I will say, and I listened to the post game show with Hans and Frank, and when it started, we'll say it was an ugly one. That defense balled out. Utah fan, a 21. You look at the score, and I think that's really all that matters because, as we said all week, who's actually watching the Pac-12? Who has the Pac-12? If you're somebody back east and you see 21-3, number 13 Utah beat number 17 Arizona State, you're like, wow, that's pretty impressive. You don't really know how ugly that game in the rain really was because it was they didn't win the turnover battle. But the defense, I'm telling you, Jaden Daniels, that guy was running for his life. He had, I think, like 4 completions on the day, 4 or 5, something like that. And Utah, they did it. They did enough offensively, and Zach Moss, I'm telling you, that guy goes out there with what he's doing with his shoulder, and he runs the ball 25 times. And he ran hard. That's a hard 99 yards that he picked up on 25 carries. I think it was like something around 4 yards, 4 or 5 yards a carry. That's right there. That's a good win for this Utah team.
Hans, again, that was another game that, I watched the majority of it up in the press box up in Logan, and it kind of felt like old school Kyle Whittingham football, where defense is playing really, really well. Offense is just doing enough. And it just felt like an old, a prize fight out there. And I like Utah winning ugly. I think it goes back to their roots. I like it. It's what we said earlier in the week where the offense is going to take a step backwards eventually. It's going to have a rough game. And can you still win that game when you don't play your best? And not only did they win not playing their best, they won, frankly, going away.
Yeah, so many aspects that we actually need to look at in this game. Some of the fallout from it with the injuries of Darren Paulo, which is the most concerning to me because he couldn't put weight on his right leg, to the injuries of Tyler Huntley that left the game with 11 minutes. And Jason Shelley came in to finish. And I don't know what's going on with that left calf, but there's an issue there, the left lower leg. So there are, and then obviously the hit on Zach Moss. Zach Moss came back, but it looked like there was a potential concussion there.
That was
it was brutal. You go through protocol, and I saw Utah fans were concerned to put Moss back on the field, but you go through protocol. If you can answer the questions, and if you look right, and if you're acting right, then they can't honestly keep you off the field. So Moss had to go through the questioning and had to do the things he had to do to be cleared to get back on the field after laying there for a bit. And so I've got no issues with him being back. But we got to see how things end up for Tyler, and we got to see how things end up for Darren Paulo, because when they made the line shift and Nick Ford moved to the outside and Tuala comes in, and it's just not, you don't have a two-sided offense that you can really run from. And you don't have as good an offense without Darren Paulo. And we'll see how that all comes together. The storyline was not the offense at all. It wasn't. This was one of the most complete defensive performances I've ever watched in a college football game. And I'm talking from every area on the field. Getting run support from your safeties, getting exact location over the top from cover twos, everybody dialing up their blitzes popping free, from the play calling to the personnel to the performance of the personnel. Everything was so clean that Arizona State felt choked out and desperate offensively. And Lloyd mentioned Jaden Daniels, 4 of 18 for 25 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 interception. And this is a guy that was averaging 270 yards through the air coming into this game as the number 17 team in the country. 25 yards. Everything was choked out. Route trees were blacked out. They were blanked. And I know, Scotty and Lloyd, typically I lean on the defensive line and I say, oh, it was the pressure that forced the ball, that this, and this. In this game, it was odd because as I watched it and was analyzing it, I've got to go back and watch it step by step, but to me, it looked like the coverages were suffocating the Arizona State routes, and the defensive pass rush was complementing that. So it felt like it was more coverage pressures and coverage sacks that led to sacks and pressures than it was pressures and blitzes leading to unneeded longevity in coverage. Does that hopefully that makes sense? So
no, I like that.
It's kind of a flip reverse of what I tend to lean on. And Jalen Johnson played a brilliant game. I mean, how many times did we mention Ayuk as being a devastating receiver? He ended up with 1 catch for 7 yards. I think he was targeted 6 times, and they just couldn't get him fed. And I'll also tell you this. As I'm watching this game, I watched Jalen Johnson go from outside receiver to slot receiver to tight end, back out to outside receiver, and I'm thinking, what? They're just identifying formation, identifying most dangerous receiver, and putting Jalen Johnson on him. And he was shutting him down. I mean, I'm watching a tight end that's got 5 inches and probably 80 pounds on him, and Jalen's jamming him in the chest and stepping in front of him on a curl. And it's like, oh, geez, okay. And then I think, I'm not positive, but I think Kyle Whittingham mentioned it in his postgame. I think he said, yeah, we took Jalen and just put him on most dangerous.
Yeah.
I think that's what he said. We'll have to go back and listen to that audio on Monday, but it was impressive. And then Bradley and I, 3 sacks. I've got him as 2 pass deflections. They've actually got him as listed as 1. But remember in the preview and through the week, Scotty, I said, I think this is a game Bradley can have an insane game. And I think this is a game where Utah can really bring pressures. And they did that. Starting right out of the gates, they had 7 guys in the box. In the first 3 downs, 7 guys in the box. The first down, 7 guys, 3 linebackers, everybody on their toes. The second down, 6 guys at the line of scrimmage, 1 backer. The third down, they brought 7 on a full man pressure. It was right out of the gates. It just looked like Morgan was ready for a dogfight, and this team was ready for a dogfight. So a brilliant win for Utah.
Only thing that looked like it went well for Arizona State was Eno Benjamin going for 104. But even that, I think, is inflated because of that long run he had, 30-something, I think it was like 30-plus yards or whatever.
32.
That was late in the game. I mean, it was late in the game. I mean, that game was over when he ran for that. I'm pretty sure it was like even in the fourth quarter. So I mean, that defense was suffocating. And that secondary, you guys said it in the post-game, Hans. You guys, I mean, it seems like from that USC game, they really put it on them and said, hey, we're better than this. And that secondary has played really well since.
Just going
really well.
You go look and what Utah's done since that USC game. Washington State. Now I know Washington State's not good, but at that point they were. Washington State had a rolling a little bit. Utah holds them to 13 points. Oregon State, the one thing they had going for them, they seemed like they were scoring some points. Utah holds them to 7. Arizona State, again, a team that was 17th ranked, add things rolling a bit. Utah holds them to 3. Utah's given up 23 points over the last 3 games.
That's pretty good. That'll win you some ball games.
That's going to win you some ball games. There's no doubt about it. That defense is just scary good right now.
There are some unsung heroes on that defense, and I talked about one of them. I think it was Tuesday, Scotty, when I was talking about a back and forth that I've had with somebody on that staff, and they said, "You've got to understand that one of our dark horse heroes, a guy that every single week is producing, even against USC, where Blackman made some mistakes, but you didn't hear this person's name." He said, "You've got to talk to Terrell Burgess when you're talking about this defense, because he is playing undercover. He is playing one of the best seasons we've seen in a long time." And so Terrell Burgess doing a lot of good things. He ended up with 5 tackles last night. He had a really nice tackle for a loss. And you just don't hear his name because he's always doing his job. And that's awesome. And the I wanted to mention was Lucky Fotu last night. Lucky just continued to press and is aggressive. And Penn State came out ready to fight. Now, Lloyd, I think you could probably speak to this. Arizona State was ready for a night fight, man. I think Herm Edwards had that engine revving, and they put up as good a fight as they could have, in my opinion.
Well, they stayed. Yeah, I mean they kept it, kind of in striking distance for the most part, just because that ugliness of the game. That rain was just pouring. You could see it on the TV, the cameras. You could barely even some of the cameras you could barely even make out the field because it was just had rain all over it. So I think that definitely made it uglier, and they were able to keep it really close until that late fumble where they were finally able to really. I mean, I got to imagine Utah fans were still a little bit on edge because they kept thinking, okay, something's going to happen now. So is Arizona State going to get a touchdown here, and that Utah defense just didn't allow it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that punt fumble, and that kind of was a muff punt, Scotty, and it kind of sealed the deal for Utah.
Yeah.
It looked Arizona State was within striking distance, but you never felt like they were going to make it happen because their offense was so smothered. But up until that fumbled punt, you thought, man, maybe Arizona State scores this and gets back in it. But time of possession, Utah ends up 35-30, Arizona State 24-30. So it was just dominant across the board, man.
Utah now with, you look at, and I think Frank Dolce brought up a really good point. These 3 games, he called it the gauntlet. You get game 1 out of those 3. Now you play another great defense at Cal coming up next week, and then you hit the road to take on Washington, who suffered a loss over the weekend to Oregon. So you get game 1, and you're facing 2 really good defenses the rest of the way. Offense has probably got to play better if you want to win. If you want to pick up 2 more wins against Cal or Washington, but that's a good way to start this 3-game stretch for Utah with that win over Arizona State. You talk about rain. You talk about the nastiness. It was rough up in Logan last night. We got hit with a snowstorm that left about 1.5 inches out on the field. They were able to get rid of it, but it was cold. It was nasty the rest of the way. And I tell you what, Hans, I know you weren't able to watch much of this game last night, but I think if you get a chance to watch, especially in the first half, Justin Enna, who's about as good of a human being as anybody you'll ever meet, But from a defensive standpoint, what they did to that poor Nevada offense was just a thing of beauty. You get a kid, a walk-on quarterback, Malik Henry for Nevada, got a win last week against San Jose State, but they threw so many different coverages, pressure coming from all over the place, dropping 8 and then dropping one guy off of that, so bringing 2 and then bringing that third man as a spy to come and create some havoc. It was really fun to watch. Defensively, they were really, really special last night, and Justin Enna deserves a ton of credit. Now, offensively, the struggles continue, and Jordan Love, outside of maybe the LSU game, probably played one of his worst games of the season. I don't know what's going on with the accuracy, but the accuracy is just not there for him right now. And the offense really struggled. Finally, they got it going late early in the fourth quarter when Gerald Bright broke off a couple big runs, 67-yard touchdown run. And so Utah State wins that game comfortably, but there's still a lot of concern around that program right now that they're not where they need to be offensively, and they just can't. It was a little surprising because I thought they'd play better coming out of a bye week than they did last night.
I'm just looking at this. I think we could talk defense and talk positively all day long about that defense, and 36 points for Utah State. Like you don't want to talk down to that. But
yeah, but you go back to two. They got a safety after a punt was dropped to the 1 yard line. Savon Scarver, who's going to earn All-American honors once again, takes a kickoff back for a touchdown. So he's now got 2 kickoff returns for scores on the season. Utah State had 9 points in the first quarter, and all of it came from special teams and defense. And then finally, late in the second quarter, they finally get a touchdown. But Utah State had gone almost. It was six. They went 7 consecutive quarters. If you count LSU in the second half of the Colorado State game, they've gone 7 consecutive quarters without an offensive touchdown until finally getting one late in the second quarter.
Interesting. I'm looking at Jordan Love's numbers: 13 of 31 for 169, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. What's different? Is it the receivers that he lost? Is it the offensive line? Is it the offensive coordinator? Or is it just a perfect collection of everything, and we haven't seen him catch up with everything yet? And
I talked to Gary Anderson on our post-game show last night. I asked him the same thing. I'm like, what is it? And he said, frankly, I don't know. And I thought we were in a good place coming out of the bye week. Obviously, they're not. And I think, to your point, I think it's a collection of everything. I think the offensive line has had its struggles. They give up especially some interior pressure. I think that the timing with new players just hasn't really developed the way that you would like it to at this point. And I think there's a confidence issue, honestly. I think that, and that's just my opinion, by the way, just pure me just watching the game up in the press box. I think that there's just a confidence level with the quarterback that I think if he gets it right, he'll get back into a good place. But for whatever reason, he's pressing and just not comfortable in the pocket. He short-armed a lot of balls last night. And I don't know what it is, but I think the right answer is probably what you said, a collection of everything: new players, new OC, new offensive line, and a much different, much better schedule. Nevada's not a great team. They were 4-2 coming into that game last night, but defensively they're pretty good. But Utah State should have put 45, 50 points on the board on that team. They're not a good team, and that offense just really had a tough time getting going. 13 of 31 for 169 just isn't going to get it done when you go to Air Force next week, because Air Force is really, really good.
It's so weird with it. I mean, it's Jordan Love. I mean, before the season started, it's, the hopes for him were so high. I mean, they were backing him, as a Heisman dark horse, and you're thinking, oh, he's going to have this big season. And for whatever reason, he just can't quite put it together, and I don't know if it's scheme. Obviously, there's got to be. I got to imagine there's got to be some confidence issues that are there right now. But it's so weird, because I feel like, how are the receivers? He's got running backs, so I feel like that should open up the passing game fairly easily. You had Gerald Bright go off for 126. Good to see Jalen Warren back out there, and he went he had 73. I mean, they ran for 244 yards.
Yep.
You got to think, hey, this opens up the pass game. And for whatever reason, he's still, I mean, that's 13 of 31. I mean, it's strange. It really is.
You know, you go back and I'm sorry, go ahead, Hans.
I wonder if one thing I can add on the game of football as a player advances, the game of football and how you perceive it evolves as your position changes. You know, sometimes you get married and you're playing football and you feel like this is the only means to provide. You know, maybe Jordan was getting scouts in his ears that are telling him, hey, you're a high draft pick, you can make millions. And that changed the way the confidence of just playing free and loose, like, hey, I'm just a freshman or I'm just a sophomore out here throwing a football. It becomes, oh, this is my life and that's millions of dollars in front of me. That can affect your vision. That can affect the way you go out and perform. You play tight instead of playing loose and comfortable and confident. So I could see so many different things changing for Jordan Love in a year. But the weird thing is he was playing as one of the top 5, maybe 8 quarterback prospects for the NFL draft because of his pocket presence and his high point release. His accuracy came from those two things. He felt confident in the pocket, and he had a high point release that led to that accuracy and led to those receptions and led to the big chunk yardages and big games. But honestly, I think that the scouts look at a couple of things and say, well, he's this level because of this, and that is his size and stature, his confidence in the pocket, and his high point release. He had an NFL high point release that was extremely confident and visible. For me, that played in the NFL, that I've watched those quarterbacks for years. Release, it was just a perfect form of release, and led to him being a high level prospect. Something somewhere, his mental makeup or his design of what football can be, or the money, or if he's getting coaching instruction behind the scenes that is degrading this, that's another thing that Gary Anderson needs to look into and just make sure that everything is being put in front of Jordan to succeed, because this just doesn't seem like the quarterback we watch. This shouldn't, losing an offensive line and losing receivers should have effect. Shouldn't change who he is like this.
Yeah, yep. And the concerning thing, and I know we're nitpicking here because Utah State won by 26, and so I'm sure Utah State fans like, hey, what why are you nitpicking a 26-point victory? Because expectations are high. Look, this team's going to Air Force. This team still has Wyoming, who's playing well. This team still has Boise State on the schedule. BYU's coming up here in 2 weeks, and look, Cougars are going to come off a bye week with a ton of confidence coming into this game. So, when you look at how you want the rest of the season to go, the final half of the schedule, Utah State sits at 4-2. There's not a lot of gimmies, maybe outside of New Mexico to wrap up the season. This schedule over the final 6 games is brutal for Utah State. And if they want a challenge for a Mountain West Conference title, there's things to clean up, and there's a lot of things to clean up. And that's the concerning part. They've already they've already used their 2 bye weeks, and so everything's on the fly going forward. There's no more weeks off, and they got to get that offense clicking if they want to achieve their goals coming into this season. So, it's concerning. Yes, is it fixable? I think so. It's just they got to get that offense right going forward. So a lot to break down.
The fact that they have Air Force before BYU. That's just brutal.
Yeah,
that's why you don't put LSU there. You got BYU coming off. You got BYU coming off this win over number 14 Boise State. So they got that game ahead of them. They have to play Air Force, which is that's just not a fun game for anybody. So that's brutal.
You got Air Force, BYU, then at Fresno, home to Wyoming, Boise State, New Mexico. If you don't play well, there's 4 more losses in that schedule right there. There's a really tough stretch there of games, and it starts with Air Force coming up this week. And Hans, you know better than anybody how difficult it is to go to Colorado Springs and get a W.
Hello.
And we lost him. Well, we were wrapping it up.
Got him.
We were wrapping it up anyway, Lloyd.
Yeah. You know what? You and I had some good stuff right there. I'm going to say that might have been the best part of the show.
I know. Honestly, sure. All right. Well, for Hans, whose phone just died on him, for Lloyd Cole, I'm Scott Garrard. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with you tomorrow at noon on 97.5, 1280 The Zone. That is your morning after podcast right here on 97.5, 1280 The Zone and the Zone Sports Network.